Hello and welcome to the Doc Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike DeLuke, and it's my mission to help you lead a happier, healthier, and more prosperous life, both personally and professionally. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Doc Podcast. I'm really excited to welcome today's guest, Mr. Kirk Teachout. Kirk is a business coach, serial entrepreneur, and best-selling author. With the launch of his latest venture, the Seven-Figure Dentist Program through Fourth Quarter Coaching, Kirk unlocks the secrets of successful dental practice management. His diverse experience across multiple industries has armed him with invaluable insights and tactics that ensure personal and professional growth. Kirk aims to empower dental practice owners to realize similar successes, and he believes that his four pillars of culture, team, systems, and schedule are the secrets to successfully scaling dental practices without burning out. I'm really excited to have this conversation. He and I share a lot in common philosophically, and really looking forward to picking his brain on some cool and interesting topics and bringing that to our audience. So with that, I'd like to welcome Kirk to the show. Welcome, Kirk.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for appearing, and really excited when we kind of chatted when we were meeting and just kind of putting our heads together on things about possibly hopping on an episode together. I really enjoy talking to you, and I'm really excited. Some of what we talk about on the Doc Podcast platform is teeth, and some of what we talk about is finance, and some is practice management, and some is theory and wellness. And so I try to encompass a bunch of those topics. And interestingly, you touch on all of them in your in what you do and in your life. So tell me a little bit about you, the background, let everybody know kind of what you do and how you got to this point.
Sure. So I say this a lot, but I mean, you can see guitars behind me right now. I'm from the music industry. I am not from the dental field whatsoever. So I feel like I have just a completely unique perspective and approach that is much different and innovative than what somebody who's been in the dental field their whole career. And I like doing that with any business that I do, right? Is trying to have these really great sources of outside industries and ideas, because that's how you innovate in an industry, right? How you get out of the rut and just the stagnation. You bring it from other industries that work, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and that's fine. But I come from the music industry, learning marketing and trying to create raving fans with a product that only you love, and you're trying to convince people that, they should love it too. Whereas in dentistry, man, it's so easy because everybody needs it. So it's like,
there's one obstacle down right there.
Yeah. So coming from a cutthroat industry that's very difficult to get raving fans to an industry that everybody needs and a lot of people want, and just using those same tactics to create an experience is just so easy. So I try to bring that to all these docs. And my wife, 4.5 years ago, was an associate out of dental school for about 2 years. And she was like, look, I need help. If I buy a practice, will you help me? I was like, sure. I love you.
And you weren't in dental at this time. You were
Yeah,
not.
no. I was watching the kids and building a company in the music industry. That's what I was doing.
Okay.
So she was like, okay, will you help me? I'm like, sure. So I scaled back on the music side and just started helping her. So we bought the practice. 6 months later, COVID hit. We shut down for 2 months, everybody knows. And the rest is history. But I loved, I love husband and wife teams. It's so much fun to talk with them. And but there's so many ways that even a solo doc, a solopreneur, can create a team around them to do even what both people do. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I got in and where I am now, and just kind of going from there.
Yeah, it's so funny because my story is literally the same, but on the other side. I was the orthodontist, and my wife was an occupational therapist by training and trade, and taking care of the kids. And I was like, can you help me with running this practice? Because as I started my own practice from scratch and started building it from nothing, I realized I needed help with that. So it's very similar to where I started. And I think so many people I think that's why you see a lot of husband and wife teams, either both doctors, one the doctor and one helping in the management side, because you need help in a lot of ways. And it's just, I think, as you said, we're these solopreneurs. We go after this thing. It's our achievements a lot of times are almost sort of a blessing and a curse. I know for me, it when you're achieving at those high levels all the time academically, you just think, well, I can just handle anything that gets thrown my way. And a lot of us too, we achieved athletically and in social pyramids. So you just kind of you have these social interactions that you have achieved success in academic actions and maybe physical endeavors, and you start getting all these things thrown at you in practice. And you're like, I can do this, I can do this, and then you start going, wait a minute, okay, now that I'm really, really busy, when you don't have a lot of patience, it's to see when you're building it from scratch, you can kind of juggle all those balls. But as soon as that patient volume keeps ramping up, when you really care about your patient care, those things get harder to manage. And so I'd like to talk to you kind of more about that and what you saw in the dental industry when you got started and made that transition over, and what did that look like? And as an outsider who hadn't, which I think is really good, because I think a lot of times in any industry when you're in it, you do tend to become a little myopic because just human nature, you're just in it and you're what you know. um, what was it like coming from a totally separate industry and looking into dentistry on the business side and the practice management side? What surprised you? What was it, what you expected? And how did you then do some of the things we're going to talk about to help your wife's practice get so successful?
Sure, that's a great question. So initially, as everybody really consultants, coaches, doctors, all these people are just like, okay, when you come in, the first thing you don't do is change anything. And so I was like, okay. So we got in network with all insurances. We kept every single team member. We didn't paint the walls. We didn't move any
Hmm.
artwork that was from the 70s, like nothing,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Um, so we came in and I remember the meeting that we had with the previous doctor who was literally about to retire. So he ended on a Thursday and we showed up on a Monday. It was turnkey.
Wow. Wow.
The team didn't even know that we were
Really?
buying the practice.
Oh my goodness.
So we show
Wow.
up Monday morning and they're like, "Who are you?"
Oh,
We're like,
I don't know if I've
"Hey,
ever heard that of anybody. Honestly, I don't know if I've ever heard
it's
that there wasn't any overlap.
right." Yeah, it was crazy. And honestly, I think it was the perfect scenario though.
Yeah.
Especially for my wife, who is very passive.
Okay.
I feel like coming from a male doctor to her, she would have used him kind of as a crutch or like
Okay.
as
Yep.
a net,
Yep.
to not really push herself as a leader and as a clinician,
Hmm.
and really second guess herself even more so than you already do as a practice owner.
Yep. Yep.
So, so it was honestly a blessing in disguise, and we liked it that way.
Yep.
But yeah, I joke with my team still to this day who are still there from the early days. Is like, we talk about when new team members come on, like that was what happened. They didn't know us,
Oh, that's great.
and they were just like, yeah. I mean, but after a few weeks, like we had a vacation planned, and the old doc came back in for a week
Oh, wow.
and to cover for us. He knew that we already had that plan when we bought the
Oh,
practice,
that's
and he was
great.
like, "Yeah, I'll cover for you." It's like, "Okay, great, thanks." So he did, and that next week we got back from Disney World, and everybody on the team was just like, "Thank you so much for coming back," which was a good confidence boost,
Yeah,
right?
sure. Yeah.
But from what I saw, coming from the music industry into the dental field, I saw that there really hadn't been any innovation whatsoever.
Mm.
Like there wasn't any push to market yourself because everybody was just kind of having social hour.
Yep.
You weren't really, which I get it. Like as you get older, you kind of start watching things, but there's
True.
that fine line of like clinical neglect
Hmm.
versus actually watching something.
Hmm.
Um, and so I saw all of these things. I was like, man, we're just we just have this huge well of value that we can give back now.
Hmm.
So we got the practice for a little over $300,000, um, and then we took it to over seven figures really quickly, because all we did was just treatment plan what they need, be kind to people, create an amazing experience for
Hmm.
people, And that's just like the beating drum of the whole office is like, how can we create an amazing experience that creates a team culture that everybody enjoys coming to, but also a patient culture that everybody enjoys seeing
Yep.
from the team.
Yep.
And
So
with doing
it's
that, it just kind of snowballed. And, we obviously broke down the systems and we failed a lot and we grew a lot.
yep.
Um, but, but we were able to focus on the things that really mattered to us. So I talk about how COVID, really, it was a blessing in disguise. We know as entrepreneurs and as business owners, and also as doctors, we know what we need to do a lot of times,
Hmm.
but we don't make the time to do it.
Yeah. Yep.
And so when we were, shut down for 2 months, we had all the time.
Yeah. No, I
Um,
trust me. I had a
yeah,
major career decision change when I had some time to think. So yeah,
right,
I get
right.
it. Yeah.
So we had the time. We're like, okay, what do we want, and how do we want to do it? So
Yep.
what do we want to do to create a lifestyle practice
Yep.
that revolves around our lifestyle that we want? We have small kids. We have 4 kids under 6. So
Jeez.
how, yeah.
That's a
So
lot.
so how do we'll get to that later, but how do we create something that we're not just working our butts off and neglecting our kids and we only see them for dinner time and then bed and then
Yep.
on the weekends,
Yep.
but still successful?
Yeah.
So we can create those memories with our kids and have the income to be able to do those things. So we really focused so much during that 2 months. I painted the whole office white instead of
Mm.
mint green. Um, Little things like
Yep.
that, to start that patient experience,
Yep.
to change that mentality of that office. And it was amazing that, even the old doctor's wife came in later on and was like, I have wanted him to change these colors for so long. I'm
Wow.
so thankful that you did because, as creatures of habit, we kind of get stuck
We
and we
do.
just
Yeah.
go on autopilot.
Yep.
But, even in leadership at our church, they like pairing older with younger and getting those new, fresh ideas that are
Hmm.
from a different perspective,
Hmm.
right? That's not challenging the authority, but what it is it's bringing fresh, just ideas.
Yep. Yep.
And that's what I love about, pairing up with people like that. It's like, okay, how can I bring some freshness to this
Yep.
and just really level it up? Even if it's something that we don't do, but just get out of that mindset of the box. How do
Yep.
we get outside of that box and
Yep.
think?
Yeah, that's awesome. And a few things you said there that I think are extremely profound. When you just a week preceding when this episode is airing is an episode with Dr. Rael Bernstein, and he and I, we recorded it yesterday, literally had the same conversation. So he's an orthodontist out on the West Coast, and we literally had the same conversation about when he started his practice and I started mine. We both started with nothing. I sublet space from another guy the days he wasn't there. He literally sublet a chair from a guy, just to kind of get his start. And we both said, he said before I said anything, just as you did here, that the entire thing is centered around the patient experience. And it's so funny because his episode hasn't aired yet you just said literally exactly. And when the two episodes are back to back, week to week, people are going to play it and think that it was set up. I mean,
Yeah.
it literally is verbatim what he said. And then I countered saying, that's how I built my practice, was creating a patient experience. And I think so often we get caught up in the gimmicks and in
Yeah.
the marketing turns into creating this almost illusion that, okay, this is what we are. But patients know if that's not what you really are. And at the end of the day, people still want to be treated fairly, honestly, with respect and valued. They want their time valued. They want their dollar valued, and they want a service that they can be confident in people that they trust. And if you
Yeah.
give them those things, even if you're in a mint green office, or in Rail's case, in a dental office in some random chair, or in my case, in some very dated sort of older office, that had, we would joke, the couch was like basically the couch you'd have in like the dorm room, like
Yeah. Oh yeah.
in the fraternity house, like that wood rail, I mean, and it
Yeah.
wasn't my vision, but and the guy was a great orthodontist in himself, but he was older, and in the practice, it wasn't my necessarily vision for an actual physical space, but we just created a emotional space that our
Yep.
patients gravitated towards, and next thing you know, each day, each week, more people are calling and more people are talking about us and more people were referring. So that's one thing I wanted to address. It's just, it was so profound, and I think something for so important for doctors, especially of any age, obviously, to remember that, but for those starting out, to not get too focused on the marketing side of things, which company, which bracket you're going to use in general dentistry or in orthodontics or in general dentistry, which scanners you have, all of these things you can kind of market to people. Great. And there's certainly places for some of those, but never let that replace the patient experience and valuing your patient. And the other thing you said that I think is really, I give you a ton of credit for, and I'm not saying this in a patronizing way. I sincerely mean that I know very few people who've done this, and I talk to residents about this, and I didn't do it soon enough, is that you and your wife sat down before things started getting a little out of control, before the speed was going a little too fast, and said, we sense this is going to happen. And how do we put actions in place to let our quality of life keep in line with our work life? And if you would just take a brief moment and maybe go into that a little bit more on how you did that, because a lot of people hear something like that and maybe they think they're doing it. Maybe they think, well, I'm not really busy right now, so why would I worry about that? Or I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. That'll be a good problem, right? That's a good problem to have, be too busy.
Mhm.
But it's still a big problem. So how did
Yeah.
you both have the foresight to recognize that was something that was probably going to be coming down the road, and then the discipline to put it into action? Have you heard about the Doc community on Facebook? It's where you can get access to more great content, including case reviews, select clips from CE courses and podcasts, literature reviews, and exclusive promotions and discounts off Doc educational materials. Just go to Facebook and search for the Doc community and submit a request to join the group. And now back to the podcast.
So I think part of it's just mindset, right? So
Okay.
I talk to docs all the time and they're like, "Oh man, so I want to own tons of practices. I want to do this, I want to do that, and so that way I can, have four Bentleys and all these." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, cool. That's fine if that's
Right.
what you
That's what you want.
want,
Right. Yep.
but my priority is my family."
Mm-hmm.
So for anybody who wants to have that balance and they want to create a 3-day work week, you
Mm-hmm.
can do it.
Mm-hmm.
We did it. Now we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out how to do a 2-day work week and still produce the exact same. And we started last week, so we'll see how it goes. But still, like when we sat down, we'd been listening to, different podcasts, different coaches. We hired a coach and who had done what we're trying to do,
Okay.
in working 3 days a week
Okay.
and still just outpacing everybody. I'm like, okay, how do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it comes down to what we've already talked about. Parkinson's law
Mm-hmm.
is that you fill the time that you allot for the task.
Mm-hmm.
So if you only allot 3 days a week, you're going to learn how to get ultra efficient in those 3 days.
Yep.
And if you're there 5 days a week, you're eventually going to fill all of that time
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to be ultra efficient in 5. But the problem is you're going to start burning out
Yep.
because this profession, even though I don't physically do the work,
Mm-hmm.
I watch my wife day in and day out, and I talk to thousands of doctors every month who are just like, and we've talked about this. If I would have known dentistry was like this, I would have never gotten into it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
Well,
It can be,
part of the
it's
reason
grueling. Mm-hmm.
why, yeah, part of the reason why is because it's physically demanding, it's
Yes.
emotionally demanding, it's
Yep.
relationally demanding, it's
Yep.
mentally demanding.
Yep.
And so what you have to combat that with is obviously the mindset. Like you have to have a good attitude going into it, being able to meditate, however you do that.
Yep.
But you also need to have more rest than you have time on,
Mm-hmm.
is my philosophy.
That's a very, so I want to restate, so have more rest than you have time on. I want everybody to hear that, because that is completely counter to the way we're wired and the way we're taught, right? We're type A's, we're achievers. We always have to exceed and keep doing more, study more, work harder, get more patients. But you're saying we need to basically look at our mindset and look a little deeper beyond just the achievement side and say, wait, I need to plan for not just 2 vacations a year, 2 weeks a year to go away. I need to plan for every week how much time I'm going to be in the office seeing patients, in the office doing business administrative duties, and not in the office or doing any of that at all. Right.
Right.
Mm,
Exactly. So a lot of times, like there's two different things here. So like two kind of different roads that you can take.
okay.
Most of them, most doctors, the average doc or practice owner will do about eight to $900,000 a year.
Mm.
GPs anyway,
GPS. Yep.
right? Eight to $900,000 a year, working 4 to 5 days a week,
Okay.
sometimes more. And yet we work 3 days a week
Mm-hmm.
with one doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have two, but one doctor,
Mm-hmm.
and outpace all of them. So most of it, that one path of doctors who are just kind of doing average and working 4 to 5 days a week, I guarantee their schedules are not really optimized.
Okay. So my next question is, what do you
Yeah.
attribute being able to work fewer days and generate equal or higher revenue?
Right. So most of it is just that their schedule is not optimized to
Mm-hmm.
do it.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee that you could probably cut out a day and then actually see what a full schedule looks like. You think it's a full schedule,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not.
Yeah.
There's a way to rearrange it, play a little Tetris, and really optimize that schedule, which is, I feel like, is my strength, period.
Mm-hmm. Got
I
it.
do
So
this with
you
doctors all the time.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's where you saw that from the beginning, just because it's just kind of an innate ability you have organizationally when you were looking at things when your wife took over the practice, you were able to just sense that, or did that take a
Yeah.
little time to get a feeling for like, wait, we're being really inefficient in the time we're here. We need to change that, or maybe a little of both.
Sure. So it was a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
So, we look as our team jokes because we have one-on-ones with everybody every month.
Mm-hmm.
I have a one-on-one daily with my wife on the way home.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we're
Know
always
the feeling.
asking,
Yep. Yep.
right?
Yep.
We're always asking questions like, okay, that was such a chaotic day. I feel like I just did a $20,000 day, and yet it was a $3,000
Yeah.
day, and I did 30 fillings.
Yep. Yep.
Why?
Yep.
Okay. Why? You
Mm-hmm.
ask the question, why? And then there's the $12,000 days that you feel like you saw four patients,
Yeah.
and that was the easiest day you've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? And so what we did during those 2 months is we looked at our schedule
Okay.
and we like, okay, if we start at 8:30, we work 8:30 to 4:30, which is another misconception or another thing that people are like, oh yeah, you work 14-hour days those 3 days. Like, no,
Mm. I'm glad you
we
mentioned
work
that. Yeah.
8:30 to 4:30
Mm-hmm.
and have an hour lunch.
Mm-hmm.
So throw that out the window real
Mm-hmm.
quick.
And that's patient
But
hour time, 8:30 to
yeah,
4:30
that's
an hour
patient
lunch. Yep.
hour time.
Yep.
Yeah, we
Okay.
get there 45 minutes before.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we stay until 5:30, but still, like, it's a pretty normal day.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so if we start at 8:30, then what do I want to do? Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, cool. What do I like in the morning? What do I like in the afternoon? And this is the
Mm-hmm.
same exercise I go through with other doctors
Mm-hmm.
is what do you like to do? What do you not like to do?
Mm-hmm.
And what does your patient base actually need? Because
Yeah.
like
Good
ours
point.
is in a
Great
rural
point. Right.
area.
Right.
And so we have a lot of fillings and a lot of extractions.
Yep. Yep. And like in
So,
orthodontia, you're going to have adjustments in the afternoons.
right.
It
Yeah.
is what it is. You could say if I want to practice where I do no adjustments after
Oh man.
2:33 p.m. and put braces on that time, but you're probably not going to have as many patients to show up. So exactly, it's a balance of
Yeah.
what makes you successful and fulfilled versus meeting those patient expectations and needs.
Right, right. And there's some docs that like doing lab work, their own lab work, and
Mm-hmm.
that's cool. Like if you want
Mm-hmm.
to do that, great. If not, delegate it. But
Yep.
either way, we look at the schedule and we look at the larger procedures that we know is going to make us the most profit,
Mm-hmm.
and we try to figure out how many of those during the day
Mm-hmm.
we can do.
Okay.
We start with the large procedures
Yep.
on one column.
Yep.
And then we go to the next column, which is going to be your restorative. So your fillings, extractions, those smaller production procedures. And we fill in the gaps there with
Mm-hmm.
those.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have assistant driven on one column on the right. So we have three columns. And we just kind of look at that and we just kind of run through it like a dance, going between hygiene checks and through the schedule.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, well, what do you not want in the afternoon? And she was like, I don't want root canals. I want those in the morning, but not the morning. I want them in the mid morning. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm warmed up and I'm
Mm-hmm.
getting going. And then I
Mm-hmm.
just slam dunk a root canal. I'm like, okay, cool. What do you want in the afternoon? She's like, I hate having hard fillings in the morning. I want those 3 to 4 surfaces in the afternoon because they're harder. I just want to be able to do it
Hmm.
in the afternoon. I'm like, okay, cool. Preference. Great. And so we just went through and
Interesting.
we figured that out and we tweaked it, adjusted it, and we trained our team on it because it's not so much if you have the schedule efficient, if your team doesn't know how to run that schedule
Sure.
efficiently,
Yep. False part.
then you're still going to be chaos.
Yep. 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 And there's a
But
couple things there too that I think to pause on for a second that I want to hit
no,
on.
you're good.
One is in orthodontics, and we have a lot of GPs and pediatric dentists and non-specialists and non-orthodontists that listen too. And so orthodontists sometimes hear this and say, "Well, it's different for us, right?" Or it's not in a sense because we still have the big procedures, putting braces on, putting Invisalign attachments. So as orthodontists, we call them starts. We've got these procedures we call our starts. Well, those obviously are where you generate your most revenue. You're not
Right.
charging people per adjustment. Most of us, I
Yep.
can't imagine. So you've got these bigger revenue generators, put those throughout your day at the times that they fit best in your schedule. And then you can work around and fill in your shorter clinical appointments, your adjustments. We call that, I'm not sure if this is something that you use as well, but that was doctor time for us.
Yeah.
And so that dance you said was the other thing I wanted to hit on. So you get that set and you can do that in any part, generalist or specialist in dentistry, and then you do your dance. And like you said, some of that's going to depend on what you want to do. Some of that's going to, which I think we discount a lot of times. Sometimes we're just like, well, I have to be available when the patients can do it for everything. Well,
No.
you have to make this a balance. And so you have
Yeah.
to be able to dance through that office and not sprint and run from side to side, zigzagging all over. And it is a flow. And I love that analogy of a dance because it really is. You when it's going, and I mean, there are days, and I obsessed. We when we chatted before, I never even divulged this, but I was so obsessive over building my day models, building my templates,
Yeah.
because I needed to have my big. I literally despised running late on my patients. It
Yeah.
was just something I just refused to do. I mean, if any of my patients who are watching this, you can write in if I'm saying something that's not true. If I was 5 minutes late for an appointment, people were like, "What's going on? Is everything okay with Dr. Mike?" Like it was. I mean, it was. I
Yeah.
literally, no matter how could have a reception room full of a bunch of people, but it was all based on who was in what spot of the office,
Yep.
whether they're in records or whether they're in pre-treatment records, post-treatment records, consultation or
Yep.
slash new patient exam, or with me in the clinic, or getting an adjustment or something that just an assistant needs. So we'd have all these people, but everyone was where they were supposed to be at the exact time they were supposed to be there. And
Yep.
if they had a 10-minute appointment at 2:20, my goal was they're sitting at 2:20 for this quick check, let's say, of a retainer, and they're out at 2:30. And
Yep.
that's what needs to happen. So I think doctors a lot of times get so busy and it gets so chaotic that they think I just have to kind of just run through this.
Mm.
And what you're saying is if you're not there yet, you better create a plan. And if you're, I guess the question would be, what if you are there yet, to those people listening and they're just like, Kirk, yeah, this is great, but I'm so busy, and you alluded to this a little in the beginning of our conversation, that we just get so preoccupied with the busyness that we
Yep.
can't change. So what do you say to those people who are just full throttle?
Yeah, and that's the second path, right?
Okay.
So the people who are average aren't really busy, but they think they're busy. And
Hmm.
then the people who are actually busy and they think that they can't scale back.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
So those people, to those people, I would say let's sit down and look at your schedule, right?
Hmm.
But and to your point, and this is something I wanted to interrupt you on, but I'll let you go ahead and go because it was so important, is you talking about how you have to respect the patient's time is how you create that patient culture.
Hmm.
Because if you don't respect their time, they're not going to respect your time.
Hmm. Agree.
And so many doctors, come to expect, especially in the medical field, right?
Hmm.
We
Oh,
feel it's even worse. So let's not
oh,
get into that. Let's not
yeah,
even get into that.
man.
but still, like in the medical field, right? We expect to get there on time, not be late, be even early sometimes, and still wait an hour in the reception area,
Yeah.
and then another 30
I
minutes
was just going to
in
say half
in
hour
the
in the room.
room.
You got it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you're an hour and a half in before you even see the doctor,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the KPI that I look at one of the most
Okay.
is I do not want people waiting in that reception area. And it's
Interesting.
not a waiting room, okay? It's a
That
reception
you've noticed
area.
we never spoke about any of this, and I said, in the reception area, my team, if someone ever called it the waiting room,
Oh
it was
man.
in our team playbook, which is our manual, our training manual. Like,
Yeah.
it is never referred to as a waiting room because patients don't wait there.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, the only people waiting are the people who drove them. That's it.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and technically, our reception area is smaller than what our practice can hold. But instead of getting it bigger, the goal is to get people back where they're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, we try to get them a little early so we're starting on time, not
Mm-hmm.
starting 5 minutes after,
Yep. Yep.
because those minutes matter.
They do.
But for those people who are super busy,
Yeah.
I would say you're going to burn out.
Mm.
You got to figure out what you want as a practice and you need to adjust accordingly.
Yep.
So if you want to stay open 5 days a week, try to find an associate,
Yep.
do something. But I mean, to me, what I would like to do if I did have your practice and money was no object and you didn't care, I would say scale back 4 days a week
Mm-hmm.
to 4 days a week and see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, people who are typically working 5 days plus a week,
Mm-hmm.
they're worried about the capture,
Yep.
right? They're worried about allowing their patients to dictate their schedule.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, the people who dictate your schedule are the problem patients most of the time.
Oh, yes. Without a doubt.
So, so last year, our main focus for the practice was the ideal patient. Who
Huh.
is the ideal patient?
Interesting. So you guys literally sat around and did you define that?
Yes, we did. So
Okay.
in our planning meeting in 2022 for 2023,
Hmm.
we looked at who is the ideal patient. We went around the whole team. Okay, somebody who's not driven by insurance, even if they have it, they're not driven by it.
Okay.
Somebody who we don't dread seeing on the schedule.
Hmm.
Somebody who actually does the treatment that we suggest because they
Hmm.
trust us.
Hmm.
Somebody who is a raving fan of us and loves
Hmm.
sending people to us. And they're not the ones that come in and say, when we ask them, how their day is, like, well, it'd be better if I wasn't here.
Yeah, right, right.
Okay. So with all of these things that we got from our team, we put it in a profile. And
Ah,
if a patient didn't meet that profile, we dismissed them.
no kid. Really?
We dismissed them.
That's amazing. That's
I talk
amazing.
about
I,
this
I don't
all
think
the
I've ever heard,
time.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that. That is amazing. And
Now, there's a legal and ethical way to do
of
this.
course, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No, you can't, right. They
No,
can't be in the middle of,
right,
I can't be have temporary crowns or in our case in full
right,
braces and
right,
like, oh, by the way, I'm really done with you. So you're saying
right.
patients that were either that at a point at treatment, that they could be dismissed, meaning they weren't
Sure.
active, we call it active treatment orthodontics, but
Yeah,
obviously not in the middle of a restorative procedure or so forth,
sure.
stabilized patients. So you dismiss them. And then maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but then did you try to develop systems to not let the patients like that in again?
Yes.
Okay.
So, man, you got to train your front desk team.
That's what I'm thinking. Wow.
So,
Yeah. Because when
yeah.
that new
So,
patient call comes in, I mean, we had a
yeah,
very thorough, my wife built a very robust new patient call questionnaire. Our new patient calls were really just off the charts good. We got so much good information from them in a
right.
reasonably short period of time. And the scripting was spot on. I mean, literally everything was written for them to be scripted on, and it was very, very precise.
Yeah.
I don't know how we would have done it to also have quantifiers in for if this patient is a good fit. So tell me more about that. How do you set those parameters and how do you get team members to understand them and implement them? Hey everybody, be sure to check out the Doc website where you can get access to tons of great information, including free educational content, access to private one-on-one coaching with me, ADA CERP recognized CE courses, and amazing patient testimonials. Just go to theorthocoach.com. That's theorthocoach.com. And now back to today's episode.
Sure. So a lot of it. So I was in the front for the last 2.5 years
Okay.
with our front desk person.
Okay.
So I was like a pseudo manager, would piggyback calls if she was busy.
Okay.
So she got to hear a lot from me. And she learned a lot from me. I learned a lot from her, but we just kind of built this system of synergy
Okay.
to where we were essentially the filter.
Okay.
Now, obviously, people will, get through that filter, but we didn't have a robust questionnaire.
Wow.
But the way that we do it, a lot of it's intuition.
Yeah.
A lot of the times within the first 60, 90 seconds, I can tell what kind of insurance somebody has
Hmm.
and whether or not they're going to be a good fit for the practice.
And
Just
is that
based off of
teachable to someone else?
yes,
It is. Okay.
it is. It is because I've just done it. So
Okay.
I fired myself at the beginning of this year
Okay.
where I can
Happily,
focus
right?
on, yes, yeah, happily fired myself. It was amicable,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
um,
On good terms.
no,
Yeah.
yeah, no bad terms there.
Yeah.
But I've been training, and our other front desk has been training this new person. And it's like clockwork. It's so easy,
Wow.
but it's just asking certain questions, knowing certain triggers,
Yep.
and as you're getting patient information, you ask certain questions, like not robust, but just certain questions that give you a feel for what kind of patient this is.
Okay.
And we're not biased, but what we do is we give every patient a solution, even if it's not with us.
That was gonna be my next question. Is what do you do when it's not a fit?
So, especially if it's, a state insurance or something we're not in network with,
Yep.
then we're like, look, we're not in network, but I want to give you something.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we have the list of all the ones that are actually in network, and
Mm-hmm.
we give them some of those numbers. We tell them solutions as to how to do that
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of doctors and offices in general, they just write them off.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many of those patients pay cash because we're just so kind to them.
Yeah. Interesting.
But you always provide a solution. So we go through and I mean, it's either, hey, this doctor I know is in network, this doctor may be in network still. Like we just give them a solution and it's
Yep.
worth our time
Yeah.
because you're just being a good human
I'm saying
being
it's
in
the right
general.
thing to do. I mean,
Yeah,
it's all well and good that play devil's advocate. People could say, "Oh, it's all well and good. You don't want them, but someone has to treat this patient." So I love the fact that it's like, look, it's okay to have defined parameters of who we feel is a good fit for us and our practice. And by doing that, we're going to allow to focus our time, energy, and efforts on the people who really do value the service we provide, as opposed to trying to convince those who don't value it to value it, which I always found was one of the most frustrating things.
right,
And then I love that you said that we also find a solution. It's not like, well, you know what, you're not going to fit for our practice. Take care. You offer them something to try to get them the service from someone that would be in line with their values.
right, right. And, because I know a lot of GPs that will, have a doctor interview,
Yep.
basically like for a
Yep.
new patient interview. And so what we do is we cut that out. We don't want to
Okay.
waste my wife's time.
Okay.
We don't want to waste our associates' time.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is we essentially are that filter. We
Okay.
are that interview.
Okay.
And we know whether or not based off of the verbiage that they use,
Mm-hmm.
because if they're already hesitant on being at the dentist or
Mm-hmm.
they're nervous and like we try to win them over by the end of the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
about how we're going to take great care of them, and we always talk up the providers that they're going to be with.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, Emily's going to be your hygienist. She's going to do a great job, so on and so forth. You're going to love Dr. Lauren. She's really great, and we do that every single time,
Mm-hmm.
so they know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
But in all of that, if we still have kind of a weird vibe,
Mm-hmm.
we don't do it because it's not worth our mental health and our time to try to make it work. And I feel like that's what so many doctors make mistakes with, that is they try
Yes.
to make it work
Guilty. Without a doubt. Did
and it
it.
doesn't.
Yep.
You can only lead a horse to water.
Yep.
And if you want to have a great schedule and a great patient base and a
Mm-hmm.
good patient culture, then you have to filter those patients out, and you have to stop taking certain insurances. You need to be able to get rid of a lot of the things and headaches that are really causing your biggest bottlenecks.
Wow. So that's again things I really haven't ever heard anyone describe, but I love. And again, some people might react, say, "Oh, that's selfish," or no. I really, being someone who was guilty of the opposite, which was really kind of trying to please everyone, and I think we are just in this profession. A lot of us are people pleasers, and it sounds like maybe that would have been your wife's tendency too,
Yeah.
had she not had you there to kind of say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." And I know so many things with me that my wife, because she wasn't trained in dentistry and was had a little more objective view from the outside in, would say to me like, we need to make these types of changes, and for the benefit of us, the practice, life, health, whatever it is. And I know so many docs that are in that position. And I think with that, you obviously uh, have, as I said before, proactively put a lot of balancing lifestyle decisions into place, and you continue to. But
Yeah.
this is a big struggle for docs, and I find especially for female doctors.
Yes.
And because, and I know a lot of them, I've trained a lot of them, because a lot of times, right about when they get done with school, especially if they specialize, but even if they don't, is about the time they're starting to want to have a family.
Hmm.
And now with the debt that everyone's coming out with, that debt is very heavy on that, weighs very heavily on them, and emotionally, and they feel this tremendous pressure to go out, use the talents and skills they've worked so hard and spent so much time and money and energy developing and gaining. But then they've got this financial pressure, but now they've got the maternal instinct, or the sort of desire to start a family. They're also bearing the child. They also have to, be
Yeah.
pregnant for 9 months and practice while they're going through that, which isn't
And deal
easy.
with the drama of a team.
Yeah, I mean, it's so how I have a lot of female docs that listen and reach out to me about this, and that I coach. And so, what would be some of your advice, having gone through this with your wife, and what can you offer them as far as what strategies can they use to balance it all?
Man, that's a good one. And that's ever evolving for my wife too,
Hmm. Yep.
right?
And I think, yeah,
Um,
probably for everyone. Yeah, that's a great
yeah.
point. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's always a struggle.
Hmm.
And I think, I mean, part of it is leveling up your leadership.
Mm. Okay.
Um, as my wife is passive, and our team knows that. And so,
Hmm.
not that they intentionally take advantage of that, but when somebody knows something, you typically do take advantage of it,
Yep.
even
Even
subconsciously.
subconsciously. Agreed. Yep.
But you know, something that early on with those one-on-ones, right?
Hmm.
When she would come in and we would be in the truck on the way home, she would be, upset about something, and maybe a team member or something. And we're like,
Hmm.
okay, well, did you talk to them about it? She's like, well, no, I don't want to. I'm like, okay, but there's two options here,
Hmm.
right? And this is hard for a husband to say
Hmm.
this to her wife, or his wife, but I said this: either do something or stop complaining.
Hmm.
So even for males, this is a problem,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yep.
Is we have a lot of talk, but we don't put it into action,
Hmm.
right? And that right there is why what I really attribute our success to is I've been coaching my wife for the last 4 years, and she's been doing the same thing for me on my side. We have our strengths, and so we play to our strengths, but we help each other with our weaknesses, which is why it's so important to have a coach,
Yeah.
right? That's why I have three right now,
Hmm.
and they all have a coach, and they all
Hmm.
have a coach,
Hmm.
right? Um, and it's to get yourself out of your head. Like, I had a call with a client earlier today, and he was like, I want your advice on this. And it's a big deal, and all sorts of stuff. And he was like, I can go one or two ways. And I was at the end of it, I just asked him, I was like, it sounds like you already know the answer. What do you want to do? You're just asking for confirmation. That's all
Sure.
it is.
Hmm.
And so if you're having that issue and you have a weakness, then you need to hire a strength to your weakness.
Hmm.
So if you have a problem with disciplining your team, then you need to hire an office manager who can
Hmm.
do that.
Hmm.
If you have a problem with marketing, you need to hire somebody who is good at marketing.
Hmm.
So you need to hire to your weaknesses, not to your strengths. Because if you
Mhm.
hire a bunch of people who are really good at what you are, then nothing's going to get done because now you can't delegate
Mhm.
and not everybody can do the same thing.
But what about the people who say, and I agree with you, what about the people who say, when I've had these conversations with docs, okay, now you're telling me to be more efficient in my schedule, work less time, right? And initially, before I ramp it up and figure that out, there's probably going to be a cut and hire a couple top level people, which isn't always easy to find the talent, number one, and or retain that talent and train that talent. And again, so for the person who's just starting out, they think I don't have the resources to do all that or the need for it, and I see that all the
Sure.
time. And I also see the other side, again, back to what we were talking about before with the managing of the schedule, who say, well, I'm so busy, the last thing I have time to do, right, it's just easier for me to do it myself than to try to bring someone on to do that, because I feel like I hear that very often, and I was guilty of some of those on that spectrum as well. So what would be your advice to people who come at it with that approach?
Man, so if you're struggling on the personal side, if you're super busy and you're trying to just keep it up,
Mm-hmm.
you may want to look at your personal expenses.
Okay, great. Yeah, yeah, fair.
You may need to scale back a lot
So
of
you're
your
saying the
personal
financial pressure
expenses.
personally is
Yeah,
causing them to have too much pressure in the practice to produce and not have the margin to hire the right people to delegate some of those headaches.
right.
Okay.
Right. Maybe. That may be
Sure. Right,
something.
right,
It's
right.
like
There's a
maybe they
possibility.
went out and bought a new Denali and instead of maybe a Toyota,
Mm-hmm.
and now their monthly car payment is an extra $1,500 a month, or
Mm-hmm.
they may have bought all these things because I know we did it.
Mm-hmm.
We did the poor mistakes like every doctor does. As soon as they get out, they bought all
Mm-hmm.
the stuff because now they're
Mm-hmm.
making the income, and then you just mount your debt up.
Yes. Yes. And it becomes a habitual, it becomes a behavioral pattern too. It becomes a
Yes.
habitual behavioral pattern. So and you'll rationalize your way out of it. I had I think was it the first podcast I put out before I even had a platform, it was last summer, and it was on delayed gratification. And
Mm,
I'm sure the residents that I teach are like so sick of me saying that to them, but I beg them, please. I say you will never live more modestly than you live right now, most likely, right? In your residency, you've come through school, you're watching every penny, you're living, probably renting a place because you're at places for a couple years at a time. Just stay there for like a little, pretend you're still there for like a year
yeah.
or two when you get out and start making money. Just don't increase your lifestyle. Okay, if you want to go on a vacation for a week to, a domestic place that's not going to be, a $30,000 trip, or if your car's breaking down and you want to get a little nicer car, but you don't go buy the big house, the big fancy car, start taking all the trips right away, because it will start a couple things I've seen, and I want to pick your brain on this quite a bit. Um, it creates patterns, creates spending patterns. It creates image patterns, which means
Mm,
when you do have those things, and then you're going to all of a sudden not. When you join the country club, you're going to just not go. We're going to not stop paying dues for a year. Probably not. But if you wait 1 year to join it or 2 years to join it, then when you're at the country club, you don't have to keep up with the people who are pulling in there. I'm down in Naples, so you can only
yeah.
imagine the cars that are all over the roads every day. But
Yeah.
in most areas, let's say it's a BMW or a Mercedes that your neighbor's driving, that pulls into the club and says, "Oh, look at my new car." So those temptations, it's just discipline. It's discipline
Yeah.
to focus. So how did in talking to you before, I know we share that value, and I've been very open with my viewers and listeners about that being the secret to mine and Renee's success, starting with literally nothing in the early 2000s, having no money, $250,000 student loan debt, and having to work our way out of it, but reaching financial freedom by our mid 40s. I attribute a lot of great people helped me along the way, and I've had them on the podcast, and it's a journey. That being said, if you said, what is, Mike, the one thing that helped get you there in the speed you did, it was delayed gratification and discipline, to
Mm.
be to uphold that. So what do you what do you suggest to doctors who are struggling with that? Uh, how do they budget? How do they look at how to spend their money? What does it look like? I mean, what is that? What's that process like? How have you been able to help people succeed in that arena? Hey, Doc Podcast listeners. The biggest compliment you can give us is to share the show with friends and family. That way, others can benefit from all the great content Doc has to offer. And now back to today's episode.
That's a tough question, because everybody's different, and there's not a cookie cutter approach, right? Because it's based off your goals, what you're trying to do, and man, I would argue that most people don't have an earning problem; they have a spending problem. So something we do fairly regularly is sit down and see what our statements, what's going out.
This is you
Like,
and your
oh
wife, or
yeah,
you with the people you coach?
yeah. So we'll do that. I'll do this with the people I coach too,
Okay.
because a lot of times, yeah, if I look at their P&L and their metrics are off, and I'm like, okay, well, why is your lab bill so high? Why is your supply cost so high? Who's doing your supply ordering? Oh, your assistant. Well, do they know how to order supplies? I
Okay.
mean, little things like that.
So you
Another
help with
thing
that
is,
as well. You help
yeah,
uncover
oh
that,
yeah,
and then do you also help them implement the systems to fix it, to remedy it?
yeah,
Okay.
typically,
Okay.
yeah.
Great.
So a lot of it is they just don't know, right? So they
Yep.
had a Benco rep come around and like,
Yep.
oh yeah, this is the best you can ever have. I'm like,
Right.
okay, well, what about Patterson or Henry Schein or your local rep or
Right.
Net 32 or like any other one, right?
Right.
Um, so I look at all of that.
Okay.
But it still comes down to saving though.
Yeah.
If you can't save while you're in dental school, then you're not going to be able to save when you start making $100,000, $200,000, $500,000, because it still comes down to Parkinson's law,
Yeah. Right.
because your finances are going to grow as your income grows.
Yep. Yep. So
And
how do you
that,
get it to not? And I know
uh,
I know how we did. I'll
yeah,
tell my story.
yeah, go ahead.
My wife put me on a budget, put us on a budget. And I mean,
Yeah,
she's told the story. And I mean, literally, like, I was like, wait, I only get this much each week. Like,
yeah.
wait, how am I gonna like get coffee? It's like, well, we're gonna have to buy coffee and make it at home. Like, cause and those are the sort of decisions
Can you
that we had to
imagine
make. I know,
making
right?
coffee at home?
I know. And to this day, something we still do, right? I mean, you set
Yeah,
up those habits, and you then find that that's fine and comfortable, and you realize you don't need all those extraneous expenses. And so, we put a clothing budget, a food budget, a leisure budget, right? Because I think it is still very important to budget for downtime,
yeah.
relaxation time. My wife just put out the first time she's not one to be on the front facing side of the camera, but she surprised me with a little 2.5 minute video that I put up
That's
on the doc
awesome.
community and on our Instagram page, with talking about the work hard, play hard. And that's always been a philosophy. You have to set up time to play. Sometimes you have to schedule time to play, and it's okay
Yeah,
to just say like, hey, look, this is going to be our this, whether it's Saturdays or you take Wednesdays off, whatever it is, and your family is going to be different, but make sure you take time to play, and make sure you budget so that when you do have time to play, whether it's a couple's sort of date night or a family time or both, that you're doing it within budget and
yep,
not impacting on that amount, that margin that you need to save. So that was our formula. And we kept it through right along. And as our income started to really, really go up, as the practice ramped up, we still had those disciplined spending habits. So that margin started to get really big. So our spending maybe went up this much, and for those watching on video, it went up maybe a little bit, and then way
yeah,
up was our income. So that margin got big, and then we started investing,
yeah,
and beyond the scope of this to talk about what's invested in, but we invested that difference, and the principles we used to budget that I learned from her in budgeting early in our relationship when I started the practice. I just applied those same principles to managing the practice finances, and then I became kind of her on steroids from the budgeting side with my practice. I was obsessed over having the best of everything for our patients, the best quality,
yeah,
everything, materials, whether it be even just, down to the scanners we purchased or the lab materials or whatever it was, retainers we used. But I also was obsessed with making sure that our spending was so efficient. So when my practice was valued by a guy named Chris Benson, who's a very well-known name in the orthodontic practice valuation arena. That year in 2018, when I had it valued, as I was looking to bring someone into the practice, it was the single lowest overhead percentage of all of the practices in the U.S. he valued that year. And I say that very proudly because it
Yeah.
wasn't because we were skimping on things. I mean, again, best brackets, wires, top of the line, everything. That was my
Yeah.
vision. So those are the principles that I used. Is that what you coach people on? Is it just, is that the right formula for it? How do you
Yeah.
recommend people go about it?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously different people have different problems, so it
Mm-hmm.
really depends. But yeah, if somebody's having that issue, that's something me and my wife do as well. Is, like for instance, the Millionaire Mindset, it's a great book.
Yeah, great. Yep.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, but he suggests doing 10%. Like you
Yep.
need to spend 10% of your income every single month on something fun.
Yep.
Something fun.
Yep.
Now, we like to be a little more disciplined and look at like, we'll budget our vacations and different things. But really, what we get down to, I think my wife's is at $250 a month right now, which is not even close to that percentage, right? And mine, I think,
Right.
is like
Right.
$100 a month.
hmm
But that's all I actually need,
Yep.
right?
Right. But that's a good point.
So,
What do you
like,
need? Right.
yeah. So like my wife likes to get her nails done every other week or something like that. She likes to get massages, right, to help with the neck and the back
hmm
pain that she gets from dentistry. And she adds all that up. She's
Yep.
like, okay, this is about what it is. And you figure out what's categorized in that.
Yep.
The kid's clothes isn't categorized in that, but what
Right.
do I
Right.
need,
Right.
right?
Right.
I do mountain bike races and I love mountain biking. And so like all the supplements, the goos and all the gels and stuff that I
Yep.
like to do.
Yep.
If I want new tires that month, then it goes towards my balance.
Yep.
And so that's what we budget. And
Yep.
yeah, I mean, same thing is like we invest the difference or save the difference
Yep.
of what we would have spent, which
Yep.
is that 10%, right?
Yep. Yep.
So you get the dopamine drip
Yep.
of the spending and the experience, but you don't have the guilt and the regret on
And
the
that's
back end.
such a great point because I find that the people who do this that I've worked with know whether it's someone I've talked to and coached or someone who just they have a similar philosophy. We all have the same feeling that it's so much more rewarding. Like for us, and the post my wife put up was relative to Toby Keith passing. And one of
Yeah.
the first things we did when we had the money was we went to a Toby Keith show. We were in upstate New York, and I was getting to be pretty well known in that area, and going and acting the fool at a concert locally isn't really the best
Right.
professional practice builder for the local orthodontist. So we would travel back to near where my residency was in Connecticut, in Hartford. And I mean, we didn't feel guilty about it. We knew how much we were going to spend on the hotel. Or sometimes it was just for a night. And it was just a getaway. And our parents were great. They'd take the kids, and it was like we budgeted for that. And looking
Yeah.
back, those are, could we have gone on some bigger weekend extravaganza and done? Sure. But looking back, Kirk, like that's as with his passing, we just started reminiscing on it. And even through over time, we look back at the pictures and things from back then, and it was some of the most cathartic, enjoyable relaxation time. And we knew we could afford it, and we budgeted for it, and we enjoyed it so thoroughly. And I think a lot of times people don't find those smaller things to do within budget that aren't.
Right.
I mean, now concert tickets are insane, but we're talking
Yeah. I get
15,
it. I was
17
on
years.
that side.
Yeah, right. 17 years ago, it wasn't that much money to get, for $100, you could get great seats at
Right.
a concert. And it was, so anyway, finding those things. And I feel that you don't regret it when you're there. You're all in enjoying it. You're not
Yeah.
thinking, oh my God, like, this is a lot of money.
Right.
Yeah, that's such a great point.
Yeah, and to your point too is like, this is something we do even with our kids to show them to like obviously as a higher earner, right? Your
hmm
kids see that and they get privileged
hmm
and they don't understand the struggle and the
hmm
the the significance of being a high achiever and a high
hmm
earner. So now, what we do, our kids are 6, 5, 2, and 3 months old. Um,
That's
yeah.
impressive.
Um, but what we do for all of their birthdays is we ask, do you want a party or a gift, or do you want an experience?
Love that. I love
And
that.
so that's something that one of my best friend's dad used to do. He had 5 boys growing up,
Okay.
and he would ask, like, do you want to go on a camping trip or do you want a toy that's going to break in 2 weeks?
hmm
And so they would go camping, they would go to a museum, they would do something and create a core memory
Mm. Yeah.
instead of buying stuff.
Yep.
And
Yep.
if we can lead our kids and just us in general, like that's the way it is, right? It's like trying to be less materialistic
Yep.
and less chasing the Joneses
Yep.
and be more disciplined like you're talking about,
Yep.
then your life is going to change. And that if you look at all of the billionaires in the world, all the millionaires in the world, like the really wealthy people,
Mm-hmm.
they're the most disciplined financial people in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to say, yes, there are the people who will not spend a penny on anything.
Right.
And I'm not saying go that extreme,
Right. Agreed. Me neither.
but I am saying that you need to be disciplined and not buying the Bugatti and get the Toyota. It's like, I mean,
Right.
Gary Vee talks about it all the time. He's like, yeah, I drive a Toyota
Yep.
and it's a third of the cost of everything that you're driving. And I'm well, way worth more than any of you.
Right.
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 You got to be disciplined.
You got to be
And
disciplined.
if you create those habits early on, especially with your kids, they're going to start seeing that too. And then you're
Yes.
going to create a better generation in the future.
Yep. Yep. I completely agree. And having teenage girls on kind of the other side of the childhood experience where you and your wife are, I know they see that. I'm confident my girls understand the value of working for your money and saving and but also enjoying and having the time to have that playtime and something in it with experiences, especially not just with doodads and Rich Dad Poor Dad is a book that
Yeah.
it was one of the first books I read that when I was in my residency thinking of starting a practice, I had no idea on business, which I kind of want to last topic I want to talk about is that side of it a little bit, kind of
Yeah.
the business acumen side that we don't get in school. But I had no idea. So it was really good for me to read that book. My wife happened to read Smart Couples Finish Rich. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad right around the same time. A guy in my residency had mentioned it, and I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And it really got me thinking differently about money and about
Right.
how money works and about how to make money work for you. And I just started to change my mindset. And I think so much of this, as you just said with Gary Vee, it's a mindset, right? It's the mindset. If you go out and you're like, oh my God, I'm only driving this and look at all these nice cars, you're a tortured soul. But and where are your values? If your value is having a really nice car, if you're a car enthusiast, well then fine, then you're going to want a nicer car. But you can't then have the huge house maybe and join this golf club and all of these other things. You have to figure out where you're going to have your enjoyment, or maybe you don't like traveling for vacation, right? So you do more like local camping trips or staycations, but you want
Yeah.
to drive a nicer car, and that's so it's a balance. And I think
Right.
so often people feel like that they have to almost be so disciplined that it's unpleasant, right? And it's like it's just
Right.
easier to just kind of
No.
figure it out and I'll work forever. So to that side, because we get no business education in the dental arena, sadly, still to this day, I didn't 25 years ago in my dental schooling, and it hasn't changed. So, young docs, right? And actually senior docs, because older docs are dealing with this too. They're looking at what they have saved over their careers, and sometimes it's not what they had thought. They're trying to make a decision: do I sell my practice? Do I sell to a corporate? The young docs coming out are trying to decide, what do I do? Do I buy a practice? Do I start a practice? What have you seen in coaching people? How I'm guessing you'll would agree that it is a very individual decision, and what one might work for one might not work for another, and vice
Right.
versa. But can you just give some guidance as we start to kind of wind down of where do they start? Do you have questions about a clinical case, or maybe a challenging practice management issue? Or maybe you're a new doc who's starting a practice and doesn't know where to turn for advice. Doc's private one-on-one coaching platform is here to help you succeed in all these areas and more. Just go to theorthocoach.com and select coaching from the menu to enroll. And now back to today's podcast.
Colonel Sanders is a great example of potentially an older doc not really figuring it out and then later in life figuring it out because
Mm-hmm.
he didn't start KFC until he was well almost into his retirement years.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just blew up from there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but for younger docs, I tell them there's really two things you need to do to get ready for practice ownership.
Okay.
One is save cash.
Okay.
because when you're trying to buy that practice, the bank wants to see that you have capital to fall back on if you can't pay yourself.
Okay.
And they're like, well, how do I do that? I'm like, well, I don't know. You just have to figure out how to do that.
Yep.
You know, what I know one doc that used to do everybody's lab work and he would charge them $50. That's how he saved cash in dental
Hmm.
school. I
Yep.
mean, you can do it. You just have to be creative.
Yep. And like you said,
Uh,
the other side of that's always the spending problem too. So watch your
right.
spending.
Yeah.
You can save cash on, there's two ends of that spectrum where you can save that cash, right?
Right. And if you can do both,
Yep.
then you're doubling up, which is
Yep.
great.
Yep.
Um, but on the other side is develop your leadership skills. You know,
Okay.
I have 3 books that I want all clients to read. The first one's The Go-Giver,
Hmm.
and it's a shift in mindset from being a go-getter,
Hmm.
which is what a lot of doctors are coming out of school,
Hmm.
to a servant leadership attitude
Hmm.
where you're serving your team. Even if you're an associate, even if you're a practice owner,
Hmm.
you are a servant
Yep.
to those people.
Love it.
Now, once again, you're not being dictated by those people,
Hmm.
but you are a servant leader to
Yep.
them
Yep.
and putting their decisions and livelihoods in the balance
Yep.
of the decisions that you make.
Hmm.
The second one's Extreme Ownership, which is Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. They're
Hmm.
awesome. I
Yep.
love a good Navy SEAL book.
Love Jocko.
Um, yeah, so I love that, and it's even better if you listen to the audiobook because it's them talking
Yeah,
and
oh
war
yeah,
stories. It's awesome.
yeah. That's a buddy of mine. Literally has listened to every single Jocko podcast from start to
Oh
finish
man,
since the beginning.
it's
Yeah,
so good. I
yeah,
love those
yeah,
good
yeah.
those that stuff.
I'm with you.
But still, Extreme Ownership is great, and if you can read the second one, The Dichotomy of Leadership is awesome too.
Hmm.
So, Extreme Ownership obviously is taking responsibility for everything
Hmm.
and seeing where you can change versus trying to get other people to change,
Hmm.
which is important. And then the dichotomy of leadership is kind of the balance. Like, what is that dichotomy there? You can't
Hmm.
go too extreme, or you go off the deep end on either side. But there's a balance,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
But still, extreme ownership's number two, the go-giver's number one, and the third one's the compound effect.
Okay.
So the compound effect, obviously, same thing with like Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yep.
They're great books because it's talking about small, consistent changes.
Okay.
You know, for instance, if you have two different people both drinking soda, one stops drinking soda, or even just drinking one soda a day versus 3 sodas a day,
Hmm.
the next day it's not going to make a big difference. But 2 years from now,
Hmm.
that person just drinking one soda a day is probably going to look a lot different than the person drinking 3 sodas a day.
Doubt. Yep. So small change over a long period of time.
Yes.
Hmm.
Small, consistent changes. And I know I've done content on this too, is like everything that's happening to you right now is the result of the
Hmm.
decisions you made 90 days ago.
Yep. Yep. It's the crop mentality. It's reaping
Yeah.
what you sow. I mean, we've had cliches about this for many, many years going back because that we all knew going back to ancient civilizations. We knew you reap what you sow. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not just relative to growing your own food. It is a life lesson. Jocko, before I forget, if have you read or had your kids read or read with them? Obviously, they're not all reading age yet, but read to them.
The Warrior Kid.
The Warrior Kid. Yeah, yeah, it's great. Isn't that a great book?
Oh yeah.
I
It's
just
awesome.
referenced it to one of actually both my daughters of like last week. They're both in just starting varsity lacrosse and doing well, but it's intense with practices, and my other one's still finishing up with basketball. And so we just were kind of reminiscing about those lessons and the discipline. Starting that discipline and understanding that.
Yeah.
So it's a great book for everyone out there if you have kids and want to kind of have them think about it. It's written by Jocko in a way that you wouldn't think Jocko would write,
Yeah.
knowing, listening to Jocko. It's really well done. So
It is. It is. And that's something that I try to instill with my kids. So, at the end of every shower, I turn on the cold water for 30 seconds.
nice.
And a lot of my team was like, "You are a freaking drill sergeant." And I'm like, look, yes, for the first couple of weeks, they hated it.
Yep.
Okay. But if you ask them why we do that, they will tell you to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Yep.
And now, if we go in and like, you've been in there for 20 minutes, get out. No, I haven't done the cold yet.
Yep.
They love it.
They're conditioned
I'm
yep.
getting them to getting comfortable with being uncomfortable because
Yep.
practice ownership, being a doctor in general is uncomfortable.
Yeah. And life is
Life,
uncomfortable. Yeah. Yeah.
yes.
I mean, life
Life,
punches back. Life
yes.
punches back. And, again, not to get too philosophical on tangents with this, but I just love talking to you about this stuff because I think so often people are afraid to say that. I think so often today, I feel the pendulum shifting back a little bit, but like with my generation, um, kind of the Gen Xers and that sort of, like it was like try to soften everything, right? Make it
Yeah.
easier for kids. Make it so that, and as docs out there know how many, well, it started as kind of helicopter parents. Now it's bulldozer parents, right? We joke about it,
Yeah.
but it's the parents who literally are, holding the hand of the 12, 13-year-old in the chair that's has no physical or mental disability or has any other
Yeah.
issue. They need support from a parent as a adolescent for, let's say, something like, I don't know, getting a new wire in their braces, right? So
Right.
but that people just look at that and like, well, that's okay. Well, okay, I'm not going to tell anybody how they have to parent their child, but I can comment and say, you're not building a resilient kid. And life is going to punch them. And it is in some way, shape, or form because it punches all of us every day. And they're going to have hard days when you're not there to hold their hand. So again, I'm certainly not the one to say I'm a perfect parent. I obviously make mistakes as well, and I'm always trying to learn and get better. But I love that you bring that up to say, hey, look, there's ways you can apply these discipline principles to your kids and to your life in general and just live and self-discipline. Jocko talks a lot about that, right? Self-discipline. It is so much about self-discipline.
And not compromising.
Mm-hmm.
So like a lot of people think that, I'm working like crazy in what I do outside of the practice because I coach doctors. I do, I'm working on a retreat right now at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh man, you just must work all sorts of hours and all sorts of stuff. Like, no, I get up super early or I stay up late.
Mm-hmm.
I take the Kobe Bryant mentality of like, I'm not compromising my family time because
Mm-hmm.
I made a post yesterday of when you're as high as a kite, your true values show.
Mm-hmm.
And when I had my wisdom teeth cut out when we were just a few months married, all I could say and bawl was, I just want to be a good dad.
Mhm. That's
That's all I could say
this,
over and over
yeah,
and over
yeah,
again.
yeah. The truth
But
serum.
but that's my core value,
Yeah, yep,
right? So
yep,
I'm not going to compromise that. And I've struggled with that
yeah.
to where like, okay, yeah, I'm not going to bed with my wife every night because I'm working late at night.
Yeah,
Like, no,
yeah.
like I only work one night a week when everybody goes to bed. I
Hmm.
never take a client call or anything between the hours of 5 and 8:30 because that's our dinner time, our Bible
Hmm.
study time.
Hmm.
That is our family time.
Hmm.
It's like setting boundaries, being disciplined in that.
Yep.
Same thing with your patient schedule, right?
Yeah.
If you're disciplined and you dictate your schedule,
Yep.
everybody who is a fan of you is going to wrap around that.
Yep.
And they're not going to be the problem people that you want
Yeah.
or
So it's the
don't want,
same.
I guess.
It's the same. It's the same formula. I want.
Yeah.
I'll wrap it up with that. That is just. It's interesting. The conversation went in ways in that I didn't even anticipate. But I just love it. I love that you shared so openly and of your own personal stories, and I really appreciate that. A lot of people aren't willing to open up about that, and I think I've tried to share more of my personal stories than I've even been sometimes comfortable with because I feel like that is how others learn. And through hearing those stories and realizing the struggles, some, as you said, people see, you just kind of alluded to it there. People see you and they automatically assume you have to be doing X, Y, and Z. And unless you share with them what you're really doing, they don't know. And maybe that
Right.
person's struggling and thinking, I'm a failure as a dad or as a practice owner or whatever it is, because I'm not doing it like Kirk or like Mike or whatever the case might be. But we're here to say, look, no, no, we make just as many mistakes, but having that self discipline and
Mm,
understanding your vision and what you want to create and working every day to get there, knowing you'll probably never get perfect at it, but as long as you're working on getting closer toward that goal, you can apply it across all of this. We've touched on parenting, practice ownership, right? And business endeavors and clinical side of dentistry and administrative side of dentistry, budgeting, finance. So it's the core principle of all of that. So I really appreciate you. And I hope everybody follows up with you. Just, I'll put it in the show notes, but how can people get in touch with you if they want to talk to you more about what you can offer?
Yeah, of course. I mean, they can get on my Instagram. My thumbs are on fire all day, just messaging doctors at Kirk Teachout.
Okay.
They could also go to the sevenfiguredentist.com. I have a
Okay.
guide there to how we work 3 days a week and have a seven-figure practice.
Okay.
But then also they can just email me, Kirk
Okay.
at fourthquartercoaching.com. But the fourth is IV. So you'll have it in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll put it in there too. But Kirk at IV quarter coach or fourth quarter coaching, but it's IV instead
Yeah.
of fourth. Cool. Okay. I will put that all in the show notes and link them up to that. So yeah, Kirk, enjoyed it so much. Really. I've enjoyed getting to know you through this process. And thanks for sharing so openly, being on the Doc podcast. And yeah, let's plan to have you back at some point in the future, kind of keep in touch. And there's so much more we could talk about. I'd love to have you back at some point.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Uh,
Remember, be like Mike.
yeah. Appreciate it, bud. All right. We'll talk to you.
See ya.
Thanks. Bye. Thank you for watching this episode of the Doc Podcast. Be sure to visit theorthocoach.com to get access to ADA CERP recognized CE courses or to schedule a private one-on-one coaching session with me. And remember to join the Doc community on Facebook for more great content designed to help you succeed both personally and professionally. Just go to Facebook, search for the Doc community, and request admission into the group. You can also find Doc on Instagram at @theorthocoach. And always remember, you have been blessed with the ability to do amazing things.